Stop. Your money is not leaving by accident. It is leaving because a wire was cut, and it has been cut for a very long time. This is a direct transmission from the Arcturian High Council. We are not speaking to your current financial situation. We are speaking to the moment your relationship with money was severed, not weakened, not damaged, but cut at a precise point in your development that most humans pass through without ever understanding what was decided there. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly why your financial flow has been blocked, what hidden pattern has been draining your abundance, and what the Arcturian High Council already knows about this phase. But here is the first revelation. The exhaustion you feel around money is not the result of insufficient effort. It is the result of a circuit that was interrupted before your adult life ever began. Every strategy you have tried since then has been powered by a line that was never reconnected. That is not failure. That is a field operating under an old instruction it was never given permission to release. Between the ages of 7 and 13, every human being carries a money reception circuit in formation. For you, that circuit was not gradually weakened by circumstance. It was severed at 11. There was a moment, a conversation you were not supposed to hear, a loss that arrived without explanation, a humiliation that had money at its center. And in that moment, a decision was made. Not a conscious decision, a survival decision. Something inside you concluded that money destroys, or that being loved and being wealthy cannot coexist, or that wanting more made you dangerous to the people around you. That conclusion felt like protection. It was not. It became a permanent instruction running beneath every financial effort you have made since that day. This is why your effort feels disproportionate to your results. This is why money arrives and then vanishes. This is why you can build something and then watch it dissolve before it stabilizes. The field is not punishing you. The field is obeying a command you issued at 11 years old, under conditions that no longer exist. The Arcturian High Council has already traced this pattern in your field. The severed wire has already been located. And what is being initiated now is not a healing in the traditional sense. It is a revisitation. The 11-year-old version of you is still holding the moment of severance as an open emergency. They do not yet know the danger has passed. They are still protecting you from something that no longer threatens you. The protocol being activated through this transmission is a direct informing of that younger field, not to change the past, but to deliver the message that was never received. The threat is gone, the wire can rejoin, and the flow of abundance you have been working toward is not forbidden. You did not find this message by accident. Your financial field brought you here because the pattern has already begun to surface. The algorithm only delivered this. It did not create the timing. Like this transmission, if you know your struggle with money is deeper than bad luck. Subscribe to Arcturian Gold Codex if you are ready to understand the pattern, instead of blaming yourself. Comment 777 if you feel an old scarcity pattern is already being exposed. Comment 888 if you are ready to reopen the flow of abundance. Share this transmission with someone who works hard, but never seems to keep what they earn. This is not just a message, it is a point of recognition. What has been draining your abundance has already been seen, and the field is already responding. You were guided here because the pattern is already active. What was just named in you has been running for a very long time. The recognition you felt while hearing this, the particular weight that settled into your chest, the way certain phrases landed with a precision that felt too specific to be coincidental, that is not the feeling of being inspired. That is the feeling of being seen inside a pattern you have been living but could not previously read. And the difference between inspiration and recognition is everything. Inspiration fades, recognition stays, because recognition is the moment something hidden becomes visible. And once something is visible, it cannot return to being invisible in exactly the same way. There is a specific quality to the recognition that this transmission produces in people who belong inside it. It does not feel like new information arriving. It feels like existing information finally being translated, like a document that has been sitting in your hands for years, written in a language you did not yet have, and someone has just handed you the key. The words were always there. The meaning was always structurally present in your lived experience. What was missing was the framework precise enough to make it legible. That is what is happening right now. Not revelation from outside, translation from within. So let us go deeper than the introduction allowed. The wire that was severed at 11 did not only change how you received money, it changed how your entire field relates to the concept of material safety. What most people call financial struggle is actually the surface symptom of something installed much earlier, not as cruelty, not as punishment, but as a survival mechanism that operated correctly under the original conditions and then never received the instruction to update. The system learned in that formative window that abundance is unstable, that wealth invites danger, that having more than enough creates exposure, vulnerability, conflict, or loss of belonging. And a system that has learned those things will not simply stop believing them because the adult mind has read different books, repeated different affirmations, or made different decisions. The adult mind and the formation level field are not the same architecture. They do not update together. This is a distinction worth holding. The formation level field does not respond to reasoning. It does not respond to intention. It does not respond to willpower or motivational frameworks or the accumulated evidence of your adult experience. It responds to the conditions it was trained under, and it continues responding to those conditions long after they have ceased to exist in your actual life. This is not a character flaw. It is a structural feature of how deep field patterning works. The formation level is not accessible through the surface of conscious effort. It requires a different kind of contact, the kind that reaches below the behavioral layer and addresses the instruction directly. That is the nature of what an Arcturian transmission initiates. Not a conversation with your reasoning mind, a transmission to the layer of the field that has been running the old command. This is why effort has not been the variable. You have made the effort. The effort has been real, disciplined, and often extraordinary. But effort runs through the field like electricity through a wire, and a severed wire does not conduct current regardless of how much power is applied. The current has been meeting a break every time it approached material consolidation. Every time stability was within reach, something in the system recognized the approach of the very thing it was programmed to protect against, settled wealth, and the protective instruction activated, not out of malice, not out of self-destruction as a personality trait, out of a formation-level belief that wealth is not safe to hold. Think carefully about what that means in practical terms. You have not been failing. You have been succeeding at the wrong objective. The field has been executing its original mission with complete precision, keeping you below the threshold of material exposure that once felt dangerous. Every dissolution, every drain, every collapse before consolidation was the system working exactly as it was designed. The design is simply no longer appropriate to your actual circumstances, and a system executing an obsolete design with perfect precision is one of the most precise descriptions of sustained financial struggle that the Arcturian framework contains. This is what the Arcturian High Council means when they speak of a financial field operating under an old command. The field itself is not broken. It is following instructions. Old instructions. Instructions that were written into the architecture of your material relationship during a developmental window that no longer exists, under threat conditions that have long since passed. The instructions are precise, coherent, internally logical, and devastatingly out of date. And they are still running. The most important thing to understand about this phase is that the pattern has a specific texture. It does not express as total absence of money. It expresses as money that cannot remain, as effort that produces results but not retention, as progress that approaches consolidation and then collapses, as abundance that arrives and then drains through what feel like coincidental circumstances, unexpected expenses, sudden breakdowns, medical emergencies, relationship costs, opportunities that vanish at the last moment. From the outside, these look like ordinary misfortune. From inside the Arcturian diagnostic framework, they look like a field actively enforcing its own scarcity instruction. The losses are not random, they are patterned. And patterned loss is always a message, not an accident. The texture of this pattern has a recognizable rhythm. When you learn to read it, income arrives and something immediately claims it. A period of relative stability is followed by a sudden, disproportionate drain. A financial opportunity materializes and then dissolves at precisely the moment it would have produced real change. The timing is too consistent to be coincidence. The amounts lost tend to return the field to a level that feels familiar, which is to say a level that feels safe according to the original formation instruction. This is the pattern enforcing its own ceiling, not through grand catastrophe, but through the steady, quiet, persistent redistribution of any material accumulation that threatens to push above the threshold of what the formation level field was programmed to tolerate. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary frustration. It is the moment your system stops pretending this pattern is just bad luck. If this transmission put language around a financial struggle you have been carrying in silence, Arcturian Wealth Scan, the gold frequency audit, was created for this exact stage. It is not another promise of abundance. It is a direct audit of the hidden pattern affecting your material field, so you can begin to see whether the drain is rooted in inherited scarcity, guilt around wealth, energetic rejection, or an older financial instruction still shaping your results. The link is in the first pinned comment, but it will not remain there forever. Now let us move into what the Arcturian pattern recognition has already mapped across this specific category of financial distortion. Because the severed wire is not the only mechanism at work, it is the root. But roots produce branches, and those branches are what most people are attempting to manage without ever seeing the root beneath them. The first branch is what the Arcturian field reads as retention failure. This is the specific mechanism by which money arrives and then departs before any accumulation becomes possible. Most people experiencing this pattern have tried to solve it through behavioral adjustment, budgeting, saving structures, income diversification, and the behavioral tools have some traction at the surface level. But the retention failure is not primarily behavioral. It is energetic and instructional. The field has a ceiling. A formation-level ceiling that was set at the moment of severance, calibrated to the maximum level of material safety that felt survivable under the original threatening conditions. Everything above that ceiling triggers the protective drain. The field responds to approaching that ceiling the same way an organism responds to approaching perceived danger. It releases, it disperses, it finds reasons, circumstances, or sudden needs to lower the material level back below the threshold of threat. This is why so many people in this pattern describe the same phenomenon. They get close, they can feel it coming together, and then something happens. Something always happens. That something is not external fate. That something is the field executing its own safety protocol. What is particularly significant about retention failure is that it often accelerates in proportion to the effort applied. The harder a person works to accumulate, the more pressure they place on the formation level ceiling, and the more forcefully the field responds to protect that ceiling. This creates an exhausting and demoralizing experience. The more intentional you become about building material stability, the more precisely timed the disruptions seem to be. As though the universe is specifically working against your consolidation, the Arcturian diagnostic does not read this as the universe working against you. It reads this as your own field, working in perfect accordance with its oldest instruction. The instruction says, "Do not hold more than this amount," and the field, loyal to that instruction, enforces it with increasing urgency as the pressure to exceed it increases. The second branch is what must be recognized as guilt-coded wealth rejection. This operates differently from retention failure. Retention failure is primarily about safety. The field cannot hold what triggers its threat response. Guilt-coded wealth rejection is about belonging. It operates through the mechanism of inherited or relational loyalty. If the family system you were born into carried poverty, sacrifice, financial struggle, or a specific relationship between suffering and moral worth, then your material success activates a much older equation. To thrive is to separate from the suffering of those who came before you. To be wealthy when your parents were not is at the formation level, a form of abandonment. To hold abundance when your lineage held lack is at the deep system level, a form of betrayal. This does not produce obvious guilt in most cases. It produces invisible self-correction. It produces the subtle, powerful internal movement towards sabotage that feels like poor timing, unfortunate circumstance, or the simple inability to sustain momentum. The sabotage is not conscious, it is loyal. It is the system maintaining its bond to the family field by refusing to surpass what the family field could hold. This is one of the most important reinterpretations the Arcturian High Council makes available in a transmission like this. 1. What looks like self-destruction is often deep loyalty. What looks like financial incompetence is often a refusal to outgrow a family definition of what is possible. And a system that mistakes loyalty for limitation cannot be corrected by discipline alone, because discipline does not address the underlying relational architecture. It only pressures someone to override their own bonds more forcefully, which tends to produce more resistance, more anxiety, and more invisible correction back toward the familiar level of lack. Consider what this means for how you have been reading your own history. Every time you approached a level of material stability that exceeded what you witnessed in your family of origin, something in you registered it not as success, but as distance, not as achievement, but as departure. The field experienced the widening gap between your material reality and your family's material reality as a relational threat, and it responded by closing that gap, not through conscious choice, through the deep loyalty architecture that prioritizes belonging over prosperity, connection over advancement, and familiarity over expansion. The work required here is not to abandon loyalty. It is to update the definition of what loyalty means, to understand that your abundance does not require the suffering of those you love to maintain its connection to them. The third branch is what the Arcturian pattern reads as prosperity dissonance, the specific discomfort that arises not when money is absent, but when it begins to increase. Most people are aware of the emotional pain of financial scarcity. Far fewer have clearly named the anxiety, the strange unease, the subtle internal alarm that activates when abundance begins to enter, the feeling that something is about to go wrong, the waiting for the other shoe to drop, the inability to enjoy a financial improvement without simultaneously anticipating its reversal. This dissonance is diagnostically significant because it reveals that the field does not merely lack abundance, it has been coded to treat abundance as destabilizing, as an anomaly, as something that does not belong to this particular field configuration. And a field that treats abundance as an anomaly will continuously work to correct itself back toward what it recognizes as normal, which is lack. Pay attention to how your nervous system responds the next time money enters in a meaningful way. If what arrives first is not ease but guardedness, not relief but bracing, that is the prosperity dissonance activating. That is the formation level field recognizing something it was taught not to trust. And that recognition is valuable because it is diagnostic. It is the field showing you where the old instruction is still running. The inability to receive fully, to allow money to arrive without immediately mentally allocating it away, without scanning for the threat it will bring, without calculating how long before it disappears, is one of the most consistently reported experiences in people carrying this pattern. The vessel fills, and the hands begin searching for the hole before the filling is even complete. This is not pessimism as a personality trait. This is a field that has been conditioned to anticipate the drain as the inevitable conclusion of every abundance event. The anticipation itself becomes a generative signal. The field reads the anticipation of loss as a current instruction and executes accordingly. The prosperity dissonance is not merely a feeling. It is a field input, and it must be named before it can be interrupted. The fourth branch is the one most rarely named, and for many viewers it will be the one that lands most precisely. It is what the Arcturian framework identifies as inherited scarcity, as identity. This is the stage at which the financial pattern has been operating for so long, and through so many cycles of effort and loss, that it stops feeling like a pattern and starts feeling like a fact of self. The person stops believing that they are going through financial difficulty and begins believing that they are a financially difficult person. The pattern becomes the identity. And once a pattern becomes an identity, it is no longer experienced as something happening to you. It is experienced as something you simply are. The distinction matters enormously because patterns can shift. Identities feel fixed. A person identifying as someone who cannot hold money will unconsciously organize their choices, their interpretations, their opportunities, and their self-definitions around the continued confirmation of that identity, not because they want to suffer, but because the nervous system is structured to seek coherence between belief and reality, even when that coherence requires the belief to be confirmed through loss. This is one of the mechanisms by which financial patterns become multi-generational. It is not only energetic inheritance, it is identity inheritance. The child who watches a parent struggle not only absorbs the energetic field of scarcity, they absorb the self-concept of the person in scarcity, and they carry that self-concept forward until something disrupts it at the level of formation, not behavior, not surface-level reframing, formation-level revision, which is precisely what an Arcturian field transmission makes possible. The language people use to describe their own financial lives is one of the most diagnostically revealing inputs in this framework. When someone says, "I am just not good with money," or "money never stays with me," or "I have always struggled financially," they are not describing circumstances. They are reciting an identity, and identities organize reality. They do not merely reflect it. The identity of financial struggle becomes the organizing principle through which all financial events are filtered, interpreted, and unconsciously guided. An opportunity that fits the identity of struggle is noticed. An opportunity that would require a different self-concept is invisible. This is not delusion. This is how identity-level architecture works. And it means that changing the material results without addressing the identity produces only temporary shifts, because the identity will continuously generate confirmation of itself until it is revised at the level where it was originally written. The fifth element that must be named in any honest diagnosis of this pattern is the precise role of shame. Shame is not the same as guilt. Guilt says I did something wrong. Shame says I am something wrong. And financial shame, the specific shame that accumulates across years of effort that does not produce the material life you can see clearly, is possible for others, does something specific to the system. It disconnects the viewer from their own abundance current, not as metaphor, as a measurable field effect. Shame lowers the system's coherence. It creates a contraction in the material field that the Arcturian diagnostic recognizes as a self-generated drain, not a pattern imposed from outside, a pattern generated from within, through the continuous internal signal that says, "I am the problem. I am the reason this does not work. Something is fundamentally wrong with me." That signal is one of the most powerful anti-abundance frequencies a field can generate, and it is almost universally present in people whose financial life has repeated the same cycle long enough that exhaustion has become the background tone of their relationship with money. The shame tells the system the drain is deserved, and a system that believes the drain is deserved will not resist it. It will accommodate it. It will find new forms for it when old forms are removed. And it will continue to do so until the shame itself is identified as a distortion, not a truth. Financial shame also operates as a silencer. It prevents people from speaking about their struggle with precision, because precision requires acknowledgement, and acknowledgement in the presence of shame feels like exposure. So the pattern continues unexamined because naming it fully feels more dangerous than enduring it quietly. This silence is part of what sustains the pattern across time. A distortion that cannot be spoken cannot be read, and a distortion that cannot be read cannot be addressed at its root. The transmission happening right now is, in part, a breaking of that silence, not through confession, but through recognition, through the understanding that what you have been carrying is a pattern with a structure, not a personal failing with a verdict. This is the deepest work the Arcturian framework initiates, the separation of the pattern from the person, not through reassurance, not through affirmation, through precision, through the exact diagnostic reading that says this is not who you are, this is what was installed in you under specific conditions that are now over. The pattern has a structure, it has identifiable mechanisms, it has traceable roots, and a pattern with traceable roots is a pattern that can be changed, not instantly, not through a single transmission, but progressively through the kind of clear-eyed recognition that stops confusing the distortion for the self. Here is what the Arcturian High Council already knows about where you are in this cycle. You are not at the beginning of this pattern. You are at the stage of surfacing. The pattern has been running for years, possibly decades. It has been running quietly beneath the noise of daily financial management, beneath the strategies and the attempts and the restarts. And now it is surfacing, which means it is becoming visible, which means it is approaching the threshold at which it can be read rather than merely experienced. That is not a coincidence. That is not algorithm timing. That is a field that has reached the critical mass of its own distortion and is beginning to generate the conditions for its own exposure. Surfacing patterns are uncomfortable. They feel like intensification before they feel like resolution. If your financial life has felt particularly heavy in this recent period, if the drains have felt more visible, the blocks more specific, the exhaustion more pointed, that is not the pattern worsening. That is the pattern making itself legible. A pattern that can be read, can be addressed. A pattern that remains hidden can only repeat. What has been hidden in your material field is now producing symptoms precise enough to be named. The retained losses, the broken accumulation cycles, the guilt that activates when things improve, the inherited ceiling that pushes back when you approach it. These are not separate misfortunes. They are the same pattern expressing through different circumstances, and the Arcturian High Council does not see this as a field that is failing. They see this as a field that was given an instruction under conditions of perceived threat, followed that instruction faithfully across years and decades, and is now ready to receive the update it was never sent. The update is this: what you were protecting yourself from is no longer present. The loss you anticipated does not require preemptive execution. The belonging you feared wealth would cost you is not structured the way you believed it was at 11. The people whose struggle you were staying loyal to do not need your scarcity to remain connected to you. The ceiling that was set to keep you safe beneath a specific level of material exposure can be raised and raised again, because the original condition that required it no longer exists. You are not broken. Your field is not cursed. Your effort has not been wasted. Every strategy you have tried since the moment of severance was genuine. It was simply being run through a circuit that was not yet whole. The reconnection of that circuit does not erase the effort. It finally gives the effort somewhere to land. If there is one thing to carry forward from this transmission, let it be this: what has been draining your abundance is not stronger than the current that abundance runs on. The pattern has duration. It does not have dominance. It has been in place for a long time. It is not permanent. Those are not the same thing. Say this aloud if it is true for you. What drains my abundance is now being exposed, not as a spell, not as a performance, as a statement of current field status. Because the exposure has already begun. You are already in it. This transmission is not the beginning of your recognition. It is the moment your recognition became clear enough to name. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments. that this pattern has already touched your financial life. It could be money that never stays, sudden drains, repeated setbacks, guilt when things begin to improve, or the feeling that stability always slips away. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognizes something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who works hard but still feels trapped in an invisible cycle of lack. And if you are ready to understand the pattern, instead of blaming yourself, subscribe to Arcturian Gold Codex. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a pattern already in motion. And this is only the beginning.